My parents gave my inheritance to my brother because he had kids, so I sued quietly. One bought their house and told them rent was due monthly. I'm a 28-year-old man. And this story begins when I found out my inheritance wasn't mine. It sounds like something out of a bad family drama. But I swear to you, the moment I found out, I felt like my entire childhood was a lie. My parents were always, well, old-fashioned in a way. My brother, Aaron, always had the upper hand. He was the golden child, the one they always seemed to praise. And I was just the other one, the one who didn't fit their perfect picture. Aaron had kids, a wife, a whole life built around him being the provider, or whatever you want to call it. But to them, it made him a better person than me. I didn't have kids, and I never really wanted them. But that didn't stop my parents from acting like it was the only thing that mattered. I had always known I was never their priority. It hurt, sure, but I tried to let it go. I figured it was just the way things were. But when my mom died, that's when it hit me. Dad, always in a hurry to please Aaron, had cut me out entirely. I found out that my inheritance, everything my mother had worked for, was going to Aaron. All because he had kids. Family needs was the reason they gave. I thought about asking, confronting them, but the words felt useless. The resentment? It was growing slowly, but it was there. They'd given everything to him. I wasn't even a thought. It didn't make sense. Why was Aaron's status as a father more important than the rest of who I was? And that's when it started. The anger. The confusion. The feeling that no matter what I did, I was never going to be enough. Growing up, I always felt like I was fighting for attention in a house that already had its favorite. Aaron was the golden child. It wasn't just because he was older, but because he had kids. That was their ticket to everything. My parents adored him, praised him for being a good father, even when he was hardly around. I was the one who always felt like I had to prove myself, no matter what I did. It was never enough to get the same kind of recognition. I remember a specific birthday, my 18th. I had big plans. I wanted something meaningful, something that felt like they cared. But all my parents talked about was Aaron's new baby and how much it had changed everything. They were so proud of him, talking about his future and his legacy. When it was my turn to talk about what I wanted to do after high school, they barely even looked up. The message was clear. He mattered more because he was building a family. Fast forward a few years, and the cycle didn't change. Aaron's kids were everything. He could do no wrong in their eyes. And sure, he was a good father, but was that really the only thing that defined him? Meanwhile, I was left trying to build a career, to have a life that I could call my own, but it never seemed as important. I wasn't a father. I didn't have kids to give my parents grandchildren. And that was enough to make me invisible. Then, when my mom died and the will came out, that was the breaking point. Everything they'd promised to me, the things they'd said would be mine one day, went straight to Aaron, not because I wasn't worthy, but because I didn't fit their narrow view of what a worthy person should be. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, and in their eyes, that meant I was just ... Lest it wasn't until after my mom passed that I even thought to ask about the will. It seemed like such a morbid thing to bring up during the funeral, but the question had been lingering for so long. I'd always assumed that my share was secured, that my parents wouldn't make the same mistake again. They'd told me as a kid that everything would be split evenly. It was supposed to be my inheritance too, my way of finally having a piece of the life they built. A few weeks later, I went over to my dad's house, trying to keep things normal, trying to keep the peace. The house felt empty without my mom, but it was still home, even if it was a shadow of what it used to be. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the same place we'd sat for years, talking about trivial things. Eventually, I just blurted it out. "Dad, What's the deal with the will? His eyes shifted. The unease in his voice when he told me there was nothing left for me made my stomach drop. It's all going to Aaron, he said, barely meeting my gaze. For family reasons. You understand. My heart sank. I tried to keep it together, tried to make sense of the words that felt like a slap. Aaron, my brother, was getting it all. My mom's house, their savings, everything. And I was left with nothing. I'd worked hard, built my own life, and yet I was nothing in their eyes. It hit me harder than I expected. The realization that, no matter how much I had tried, it was just never going to be enough. That moment, sitting there across from my dad, I felt completely alone. Like I didn't matter at all. The injustice burned in me, sharper than any wound. I'd never felt so small, so dismissed, like all the years of trying to please them had been for nothing. I had been a fool to believe otherwise. I can't even describe the feeling when I left my dad's house that day. My mind was racing, my hands shaking. I was angry, no furious. But there was something else, too. Helplessness. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard I fought, no matter how much I deserved what was rightfully mine, I would always be cast aside. I kept telling myself it was just money, just material things, but the emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed by the two people who should have loved me unconditionally. The people who should have fought for me instead of handing everything to Aaron just because he had kids. For weeks, I walked around like a ghost. I could barely focus at work, my mind constantly going back to that conversation. The resentment built up, and with it, the crushing weight of not being good enough. I'd never felt so small in my life. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I realized it wasn't just the inheritance I wanted, was my dignity. My right to be seen as equal in the eyes of my parents, to not be dismissed because I didn't fit their image of a worthy son. That's when the shift happened. I couldn't let this go. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. The kind of justice I never got from them. The kind I was going to have to fight for myself. I spent nights researching, reaching out to lawyers, figuring out my options. I knew it would be messy, that it would change things forever, but I didn't care anymore. The silence, the lies. The years of being overlooked, those things had to be paid for. I decided to sue. Quietly. I'd keep it all under wraps, not letting anyone know until I had something solid. My plan was simple: win the case, get what was mine, and make sure Aaron knew exactly why I was doing it. If my parents wouldn't give me a fair chance, I'd take it. Starting this legal battle felt like stepping into a completely foreign world. It was overwhelming, but it was also the only way I could get any peace. I had to act fast, but carefully. I couldn't let Aaron or my dad catch wind of what I was doing, or everything would blow up in my face. So, I kept my plan hidden. The first step was finding a lawyer, someone who understood the delicate nature of suing family. I met with a few, but most of them gave me the same tired advice. It'll be ugly. It'll tear the family apart. No kidding. But I didn't care anymore. I was already broken. If I didn't do this, I'd lose everything I had left. Gathering evidence was harder than I expected. I had to dig through old documents, records, anything that would prove my parents had promised me something. It was like I was chasing ghosts, trying to put together a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. The hardest part was the isolation. I couldn't talk to anyone about it, not even my closest friends. I kept it all locked away inside, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. Every time I thought about how my family would react when they found out, I felt the weight of betrayal all over again. And then, during one of the late-night sessions, I found it. A flaw in the will, something no one had noticed before. It wasn't obvious, just a small detail tucked into the fine print, but it was enough. The document wasn't legally sound. It was a mistake that could unravel everything. I couldn't believe it at first, The hope I'd buried deep inside me surged. This could be it. This could be my chance to win. To take back what was mine and make sure my brother knew the truth about what had been taken from me all these years. I thought I had everything under control. But of course, I didn't. Aaron found out about the lawsuit before I was even halfway through the legal process. I still don't know how. Maybe he heard rumors. Maybe Dad let something slip, but the moment I found out, I knew things were going to get worse. Much worse. Aaron called me one night, his voice cold and sharp. "You really think this is the way to get what you want?" He spat, almost laughing. "You think you can take from me, from Dad, and get away with it?" I didn't say anything at first. I could hear the smugness in his tone, the superiority that came with being the family man who'd played the game perfectly. "You're not going to win," he added. "And if you keep this up, you'll lose everything. You'll be the one who ruins the family, not me." The weight of his words settled like a rock in my stomach, but I wasn't going to let him see it. He threatened to drag my name through the mud, to paint me as the villain in front of everyone, to make sure I never saw a dime of the inheritance. But the more he spoke, the more I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for money. This was bigger than that. I was fighting for my dignity, my place in the family, and my right to be treated fairly. It wasn't just Aaron's threats. My aunts, uncles, even my cousins, all of them started calling, telling me to drop the lawsuit. "You're tearing the family apart," they said. "Don't you care about your parents' legacy?" But I didn't care about the legacy anymore. They didn't care about me. All they cared about was protecting Aaron, keeping the status quo intact, even if it meant trampling over me in the process. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. This fight had become something deeper. If they wanted a war, I was ready. I remember the moment everything seemed to crash down. The court ruled against me temporarily. It wasn't the final verdict, but it was a devastating blow. The judge had decided that I hadn't provided enough evidence to challenge the will. For the first time, I felt completely and utterly defeated. The ground beneath me felt like it was slipping away. I spent that night sitting in my apartment, staring at the papers in front of me, feeling numb. The lawyer said we could appeal, that it wasn't over yet, but I couldn't hear any of it. All I could think about was how I had tried to do everything right and still failed. The calls and texts from Aaron didn't help. He kept sending smug messages saying things like, "I told you you'd lose, or you'll never win this." Every word felt like a knife in my chest. I couldn't understand why they weren't willing to see me as their equal, as someone deserving of a fair chance. I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. The pressure was taking a toll on me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Work was suffering. My friends stopped reaching out because they knew I was spiraling. I isolated myself, feeling like I was walking through life in a fog. Every time I looked at the case, every time I thought about fighting again, I felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on me. I started to wonder if this fight was even worth it. Was it worth all the pain, all the emotional toll? I'd been fighting for something that felt so distant now, like I was chasing a dream that had already been stolen. Maybe Aaron was right. Maybe I should just walk away and forget about it all. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just give up. Not after everything. Not after all I had sacrificed. I had to keep fighting, not just for the inheritance, but for me. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, something happened that changed everything. It was a small detail, a tiny slip-up that I hadn't noticed before. One of the legal documents. I had been reviewing a copy of the original will, contained a clause that hadn't been filed properly. The signatures were there, yes, but there was a date mismatch. It wasn't just a minor oversight. It was a legal error that could potentially invalidate the entire will, I remember the exact moment when my lawyer confirmed it. He called me, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "This could be the key to your case," he said. "If we play this right, we've got them." My heart raced as I took in the information. This was what I'd been waiting for, the breakthrough I desperately needed. I felt a spark of hope light up inside me for the first time in weeks. With this new information, I felt stronger, more confident. The exhaustion, the doubt, all of it faded away as I prepared for the final showdown. I knew the road ahead would still be tough, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The tables had turned. And now it was time to fight back with everything I had. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control. I wasn't just the guy who had always been ignored, always pushed aside. I had found my strength. I had taken charge of my future, my destiny. And this lawsuit was no longer about money, was about asserting my place in this family, demanding respect for the person I had become. As I walked into the courtroom for the next hearing, I felt the weight of my past lift a little. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance. I was fighting for myself. The day of the final hearing was a blur. I sat there, tense and waiting, listening as my lawyer presented the evidence, the legal flaw in the will that had been missed for so long. I could feel the weight of every word, every argument, building toward the moment when the judge would make a decision. I kept telling myself that no matter what happened, I had already won in my own way. But deep down, I knew this was it. This was the moment that would define everything. When the judge finally spoke, the words hit me like a wave. "The will as it stands is invalid," he declared. "The inheritance will be redistributed according to the law." I had won. My heart surged, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of relief. A weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying had finally lifted. I wasn't just getting what was mine. I was getting back my dignity, my right to be seen as equal in this family. The legal victory was more than just about the money. It was about justice. It was the validation I had been craving for so long. The affirmation that I wasn't just the other sibling, that I was worthy of being heard. I had fought for this, and I had earned it. But just as I thought I could breathe again, the twist came. Aaron called me later that day. I didn't pick up at first, but when I did, I could hear it in his voice, his usual smugness, but something darker underneath it. "Congrats," he said, barely hiding the bitterness. "But don't get too excited. I'm not paying you a penny." My stomach dropped. It was like everything I'd fought for, the validation, the recognition, was suddenly hollow. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. I didn't waste any time. The first thing I did with the inheritance, what I had fought so damn hard for, was buy my parents' house. It might sound cold, maybe even petty, but in that moment, it felt like the only thing that made sense. After everything they had put me through, this was my way of flipping the script, of showing them that I wasn't the helpless one anymore, that I wasn't just going to sit in the shadows, waiting for them to decide my worth. The house, the one I'd spent my childhood in, was now mine. The thought of it sent a strange thrill through me. I'd seen how they'd treated it like a possession, a piece of their legacy, a tool to control, to show their power. But now, the power had shifted. I wasn't just a visitor in their world anymore. I was the one calling the shots. When I told my dad, his face was a mix of disbelief and anger. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. "That house was supposed to stay in the family. Your mother would have wanted it that way." I met his gaze, unwavering. "It is staying in the family," I said. "But now you'll be paying rent." His jaw clenched, and I could see the fire of resentment burning in his eyes. Aaron, of course, was furious. He called me all kinds of names, accusing me of being vindictive, of ruining everything. But the more they complained, the more I realized how satisfying this was. I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I was doing it to take back my power. And it worked. They had always held the control, but now they had to pay for what they had always taken for granted. I didn't just buy a house. I bought my freedom. And now, every month, my parents would be reminded of what I had taken from them, not just the money, but their hold over me. They had no choice but to accept it. When I finally stood in front of my dad and told him the rent was due, I had never felt so simultaneously powerful and conflicted in my life. The words came out with a steady calmness I hadn't expected. "I own the house now," I said. "You'll be paying me rent every month, just like any other tenant." His eyes went wide, a mix of shock and fury. "What did you say?" he asked, voice trembling. I repeated, slowly, letting the weight of the words settle between us. "You're paying rent. Starting now. I own this place, and you'll be treated like anyone else who lives here." For a moment, he didn't speak. The silence hung heavy, and I felt a cold shiver run through me. My dad, the man who had always been the one with the power, the one who controlled everything, was suddenly so small. I watched him squirm, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. But what hit me hardest wasn't the anger, it was the realization that I wasn't just confronting my dad. I was confronting everything I had been trying to prove to them my whole life. That I was worthy. That I mattered. Aaron was there too, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. He didn't say a word at first, but I could see it in his face: disappointment, frustration, but also a hint of admiration, like he was trying to process what had just happened. "You've gone too far," he finally muttered, his tone bitter. "This is family, not a business deal." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything. Family. If it was really about family, maybe you should have treated me like one. The pain of it was still there. This wasn't easy for me. This wasn't just about money, or the house, or even the victory in court. It was about something deeper, something I had never been able to express to them. I had one, but the cost of it was my family. I could feel it slipping away. I knew I had to do this, but that didn't stop the ache. My triumph was bitter, empowering, but also hollow. The justice I had fought for felt less sweet when I saw how broken everything was around me. Looking back, I see how much I've changed. What started as a battle for money, for an inheritance, turned into something far more significant. I didn't just reclaim what was rightfully mine, I reclaimed myself. I had spent so much of my life feeling like a shadow in my own family, constantly overlooked, constantly dismissed. But through all the pain, through the fights and the anger, I had built something more valuable than any house or inheritance: my independence, my self-worth. I can't lie and say it didn't come at a cost. The strain on my relationship with my family is permanent. The emotional toll of losing that connection is something I'll carry with me, but it's a part of me that I've come to accept. I had to do this. I had to make that choice, even if it meant losing them. They were never going to give me the respect I deserved unless I took it. The house, the money, it doesn't matter anymore. The battle for justice wasn't just about proving that I was entitled to what my parents promised me. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just the other child who didn't fit into their narrow mold. I was worthy of being heard, of being seen. I stand here now, not as a victim, but as someone who took control of their life. The next chapter is mine to write, and I'm not afraid of what comes next. I'm free, and I'm stronger than I've ever been. If there's one thing I've learned through this whole ordeal, it's this: family is not defined by blood, by who you're related to, or by who has the most to give. It's defined by respect. And justice, real justice, isn't about revenge. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. I'm done looking back. It's time to move forward.